The bank claimed I owed $750,000, yet I never signed anything. My wife used my name to purchase her boyfriend a house. What I did next drained the color from her face. Can you imagine thinking your life is perfectly normal, only to have a single phone call shatter everything you believe? Because what if I told you, in one horrifying moment, I discovered the woman I married, the one I trusted completely, had not only betrayed me in the deepest way imaginable, but she'd used my entire identity to do it. It was a Thursday, and I remember it specifically because the office cafeteria was serving their god-awful beef stroganoff. I was halfway through picking out the mushrooms when my phone buzzed. Sentinel Bank, Mortgage Department. I frowned. I didn't have a mortgage, let alone with Sentinel Bank. I answered, more out of pure curiosity than actual concern. And then, a sickeningly cheerful voice came on the line. "Hello, Mr. Devlin? We're calling regarding your third missed mortgage payment for the Duskwood property." My blood ran cold. Wait, I stammered, trying not to sound rude. "I think you have the wrong Marcus Devlin. I don't own a home, I rent." But the woman on the other end, clearly used to borrowers denying everything, just asked for my birth date and the last four of my social. I gave them, still thinking it was some weird error. But when she read my details back to me, perfectly, my stomach just dropped. She offered to resend the statements. "Yes," I managed to mutter. "Please." To this email. The moment she hung up, I couldn't taste the stroganoff anymore. My hand was trembling. My head was spinning, trying to grasp something that made absolutely zero sense. I pulled up my email, checked my spam folder, a place I rarely ever looked. And there it was. Not one, but multiple urgent messages. Payment overdue. Foreclosure warning. My name. My information. A balance of $746,000 and change. 3 missed payments. And an address I'd never, ever seen in my life. I clicked on an attached PDF, the original mortgage contract. And then I saw it, my name, typed neatly, and a signature that looked like someone had been practicing being me. It was close. Close enough to fool anyone at first glance. But it wasn't mine. The loops in the D were too tight. The tail of the N slanted upward, like a forced confidence. Someone had tried really hard to forge my name. I leaned back in my chair, my lungs seizing up. This wasn't some clerical error. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had stolen my name, my entire identity, to secure $750,000 in debt. But who? I didn't even need to finish the thought. Deep down, in that primal part of my gut, I already knew. I drove home early. I didn't say a word to my boss, didn't finish my lunch. I just grabbed my jacket and keys and walked out, feeling like my entire body was on fire. My apartment was only 20 minutes away, but the road blurred beneath my tires. I couldn't feel the wheel. Couldn't feel my own fingers. All I could see was that fake signature. All I could hear was that woman's voice, reading my birth date like it belonged to some stranger. When I walked through the door, she was in the kitchen. My wife. Making tea. The scent of lemon and ginger, a smell I used to love, now felt suffocating. She smiled when she saw me. "You're home early," she said. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer right away. I just walked to the counter, opened my laptop, pulled up that email, and turned the screen toward her. "You want to explain this?" Her eyes flicked down. And her smile didn't even twitch. She just set her teacup down and shrugged. "Oh, that? My voice cracked, but I didn't raise it. "They say I bought a house for $750,000. "Technically you did," she said, calmly. Too calmly. "I mean, your name is on the paperwork. It just made things easier." "Easier?" I blinked. "Easier for who?" She didn't answer. Just picked up her cup and walked into the living room, like this conversation wasn't about to obliterate our entire lives. I followed her. "Did you forge my signature?" "You weren't using your credit for anything serious," she said, as if that made it okay. As if that made it better. "I didn't think you'd mind." I stood there frozen, trying to process what I just heard. She'd signed a mortgage in my name, without my knowledge, for a house I didn't even know existed. And she thought I wouldn't mind? "Who's living there?" I asked, though a dark part of me already knew. I'd seen the extra gym clothes in the laundry lately. A new, unfamiliar cologne lingering after she'd been out late. Things I'd told myself not to overthink. She hesitated. No one, really. I mean, a friend. He needed a place. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I swear I would have broken something. A friend. She didn't respond. Her silence was the loudest, most gut-wrenching confession I'd ever heard. I turned and walked back toward the door. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to breathe air that wasn't soaked in her betrayal. Before I left, I looked back at her one last time. She was sitting there, sipping her tea, legs crossed, eyes completely blank. Like she genuinely couldn't understand why I was so upset. And in that chilling moment, I realized this wasn't guilt. This wasn't regret. This was just routine. The drive back to our condo felt impossibly long, even though it was only 20 minutes. When your world starts to unravel like that, time doesn't just slow down, it actively mocks you. The quiet in my car was louder than any scream. My hands were still shaking on the wheel, not from fear, but from a cold, heavy brick of disbelief and betrayal lodged in my gut. The knowledge that the woman I came home to every single night had sold my name like a second-hand coat. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there for a moment, trying to breathe. I knew I couldn't go back inside without answers. But I also couldn't pretend I didn't already know the truth. Talia had done this. She'd used my trust, my identity, my credit, me. And she wasn't sorry. She was smug. Relaxed, even. As if forging my name on a $750,000 loan was just another item on her daily to-do list. Inside, she was in the bedroom, scrolling through her phone, one leg tucked under her. The same woman who used to wait for me at the door with takeout and a grin, now just looked up like I was interrupting her peace. Back again? She asked. You're acting like someone died. I didn't sit. I didn't even take off my jacket. I just opened my laptop, zoomed in on that fake signature, and turned the screen toward her. Who wrote this? I asked. My voice was calm. Too calm. Like I was trying to negotiate with a live grenade. She sighed, tossed her phone aside. Why are we still talking about this? I told you, it was just easier. The loan officer needed a name with strong credit. You weren't using yours. I did what made sense. What made sense? I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. Talia, this is fraud. This is identity theft. This is relax, she cut in, waving her hand like I was being dramatic. You act like I ruined your life. I didn't steal from you. I didn't run off with your savings. I just used your name. And you're still here, still working, still fine. So, what's the problem? That was the exact moment I understood just how far apart we truly were. She didn't see it as betrayal. She saw it as resourcefulness. Like she was solving a puzzle, and I was just one of the pieces. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I didn't know the woman I'd married. Not truly. I opened a browser and started digging. It didn't take long. The forwarding address on the mortgage documents wasn't some clerical accident. It was a real address, in a luxury-gated community just outside the city, Duskwood. I'd only ever passed it on my way to work, a place with palm-lined streets, security guards, and HOA fees that could pay off my car. And there it was, listed online in a recent, just-sold post for 82 Alderview Court. Sold. Under my name. Photos of the interior flashed before my eyes like a cruel, mocking joke. Vaulted ceilings, a designer kitchen, a backyard pool. Everything I'd never had, never even wanted, and yet, apparently, I now owned it. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I grabbed my keys and left again. Where are you going? She called after me. I'm going to see the house I paid for. I didn't wait for a reply. Driving into Duskwood felt like stepping onto a movie set. Perfect lawns, identical mailboxes, everyone's sprinklers on some secret schedule. I slowed down as I neared Alderview Court. I didn't even have to guess which house it was. I knew it. And there she was. On the porch. Laughing. Wearing black leggings and an oversized tee, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked at home. Comfortable. Like she belonged. She had a drink in one hand, iced coffee, judging by the condensation, and she was leaning against a man. A tall, muscular man. The kind of gym trainer type. Close shave, sunglasses, tattoos snaking up his arm. He had one hand on her hip, the other casually holding a leash to a golden retriever. He leaned in and kissed her cheek, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I just sat there in my car, watching the woman I married play house with someone else, on a property bought under my name. They didn't see me. I didn't want them to. I drove off without a word. Not because I was scared. Because I was done playing games. This wasn't going to be another argument where I raised my voice, and she just rolled her eyes. No. This was war. Quiet. Calculated. Surgical. And I was absolutely not going to lose. That night, back in my now silent condo, I didn't say a word. Talia was out late, no doubt back on that porch with him. I sat at the kitchen table, lights off, staring at the copy of that mortgage document. I printed it out, circled every piece of forged information, marked that fake signature with a red pen like I was grading a failing exam. I highlighted the names. I noted the timestamps on the emails. Then I pulled out an old business card from my drawer, Shay Rohr. An old college friend, now one of the toughest fraud lawyers in the city. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, but people like Shay don't forget who stood by them when they were still fighting for internships. I picked up my phone and called. Shay, I said when she answered, groggy from sleep. Marcus, she replied, her voice clearing. Well, it's been a minute. Yeah, I said. And I need a favor. What kind? She asked. The kind that comes with forged signatures, $750,000 in debt, and a man living in my house with my wife. There was a beat of silence on the line. Then her voice dropped into that tone I remembered from our debate days. Calm. Confident. Lethal. Meet me in the morning. Bring everything. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Don't worry, she added. We're going to bury them. And for the first time that day, I actually exhaled. The next morning, I woke up to a silence that didn't comfort or soothe. It was the kind of silence that stretches across a room like a ghost, reminding you that everything familiar is now foreign. Talia hadn't come home. Not that I truly expected her to. She probably knew better than to face me after what I'd seen. Still, some small, foolish part of me hoped she'd walk through the door with an apology, even a lie I could see right through. But nothing. I got dressed without thinking. Jeans, a plain shirt, my oldest sneakers, the kind I didn't care about getting dirty. This wasn't a confrontation. This was reconnaissance. I needed to see them again on their turf, in the world they'd built using my name. I left early, stopped at a coffee shop a few neighborhoods over. I didn't want to show up rattled or worse, rushed. I needed to feel composed. To have a clear head. I sat at the back of the shop, watching the steam rise off my coffee, pulling up the listing for 482, Alderview Court again. That house. With its pool, its 4 bedrooms, its walk-in closet bigger than my entire bedroom. Built with stone and arrogance, and funded by a signature I never gave. Around 10, I drove back into Duskwood. This time slower. This time, as a man who already knew the truth. The security guard at the front gate barely glanced up. One look at my name on the mortgage file was all it took to wave me through. That was the part that made me feel sickest. Everyone believed it was mine, because on paper, it was. I turned onto Alderview and parked a few houses down enough distance to watch, but not so much that it looked suspicious. I stepped out of the car, leaned casually against the hood, pretending to check my phone. A few joggers passed. An older couple walked their dog. No one knew I was there to witness a betrayal playing out in real time. And then I saw her. She stepped onto the back porch through the sliding glass doors, barefoot again, hair tied up, wearing one of those oversized crew necks. Probably his. She was laughing, throwing her head back the way she used to when we first met. Only this time, it wasn't for me. He came out a moment later. The boyfriend. Jackson. He wasn't trying to hide anything. In fact, he moved like someone who knew he belonged. Tank top, basketball shorts, that smug little bounce in his step. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pressed a kiss into her shoulder like he'd done it 100 times before. And maybe he had. They sat down on the patio chairs, sipping from matching mugs. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could tell she was comfortable. He was at ease. And every brick in that house, every tile on that roof, had come at the cost of my credit, my identity. He stood up after a while, walked across the yard, tossing a ball for the golden retriever. The same dog I'd seen the day before. He looked like the picture of suburban bliss. The kind of man you'd see in an insurance ad, holding a coffee in one hand and a baby monitor in the other. Talia followed him down the steps, and they met under a small pergola near the back fence. They stood close. Too close. And when she leaned up to kiss him, I turned away. Not because I couldn't take it, but because I didn't need any more proof. I had enough. I got back in the car and drove off. Not quickly, just steady, like someone running through a checklist in their head. There was nothing left to say to her. Nothing to ask him. I'd seen what I needed to see. But as I reached the gate again, something flickered in my peripheral. A camera flash. Someone was taking a photo from their porch. Probably a bored neighbor curious about the unfamiliar car parked on their street. I hoped they got a good angle. I hoped they caught the license plate. I wanted Talia and her backyard boyfriend to know I'd been there. That their little secret wasn't so secret anymore. Back at my condo, I showered and changed. I wanted their scent, real or imagined, scrubbed from my skin. I tossed the clothes into a trash bag, shoved them under the sink. Not out of anger, but because I was done carrying their weight. At noon, I met Shay at her office downtown. She looked exactly the same, sharp eyes, even sharper suits. No hug, just a gesture to the chair, and she slid a manila folder across the desk. I did some digging, she said, opening a second folder. The deed's in your name. The financing is tied to your social. But there's more. She handed me a screenshot. An Instagram post. Talia and Jackson, his name was Jackson, standing in front of that Duskwood house. His caption read, "New beginnings with the Queen. Home sweet home." Then another, a tagged photo from Talia's cousin Mara's birthday party. Jackson in the background, hand on Talia's waist, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. She hadn't even tried to hide it. "Here's the kicker," Shay said, sliding over a final document. "Your wife listed him as a resident beneficiary on the property insurance forms. That means if anything happened to the house, he would receive the payout. Not you." My jaw clenched. "She added him to the insurance policy?" Shay nodded. "Which means they didn't just sign your name and play house. They planned to keep it long-term. And they wanted the money to flow in his direction if anything went south." The word conspiracy hit me again, but this time, I wasn't shocked. I was steady. Shay leaned forward. "We can build a case. Fraud, forgery, misrepresentation, possibly criminal identity theft, depending on what the bank decides. But I need one thing from you." "What's that?" "Don't lose your head. No revenge plans. No dramatic confrontations. Just let me handle it. Paper trail only." I actually smiled. "No drama," I said. "Justice," she smirked. "Good. Because the kind of justice I serve comes with handcuffs or lawsuits." We spent the next hour organizing everything. I gave her every document, the mortgage PDF, that forged signature, the emails, screenshots of Talia and Jackson's love nest. We drafted an official complaint for Sentinel Bank's fraud division and outlined a plan to freeze any future transactions on the house. Before I left, Shay tapped her pen against the table. "You ready for this, Marcus?" I looked her in the eye. "I've been ready since I saw him in that backyard." I walked out of her office into the cold spring air. The sky was gray, the wind sharp. But for the first time in days, I wasn't numb. I wasn't broken. I was clear. They could have the backyard kisses, the matching coffee mugs, the golden retriever. I had the paper trail. And now I had a plan. There's a kind of rage that doesn't explode. It doesn't scream or punch walls or throw plates. It just waits quietly, like a trap. That's the kind of rage I carried back into Shay's office 2 days later. By then, she'd already sent out preliminary inquiries to Sentinel Bank. We were waiting for official documents to confirm the trail of signatures, insurance policies, and digital authorizations tied to my name. But what made Shay dangerous wasn't just the paperwork. It was her ability to see 10 moves ahead. To build a case not just with evidence, but with pure, cold intention. She didn't want revenge for me. She wanted records that would leave no room for doubt. I sat across from her as she scrolled through a folder on her screen. Her expression didn't change, but I noticed a flicker in her eyes when she found what she needed. There's a time-stamped IP address from the e-signature, she said. Used to finalize the mortgage application. And it traces back to your condo's Wi-Fi. Your own internet. She did it from my house. On my network. I swallowed hard. The betrayal wasn't just deep. It was local. I'd probably been sitting in the living room when she signed it. Maybe watching a game. Maybe asleep. Maybe she'd asked if she could borrow my laptop to order groceries and used that moment to completely destroy me. There's more, she added, pulling up another document. The homeowner's insurance on the Duskwood house includes an additional insured. I already knew what was coming. Jackson. She nodded. And according to the metadata from the application form, it was submitted 3 days before the mortgage finalized. That means this was premeditated, Marcus. She planned to get the house. Planned to include him. And used your name to do it. That's not a mistake. That's coordinated fraud. The words hung in the air like smoke. Premeditated, coordinated. I should have been furious. I should have wanted to slam something into the wall. But all I felt was clarity. This was no longer personal. This was strategic. So, what do we do? I asked. She leaned back and smiled. We freeze the battlefield. She made calls to the fraud division at Sentinel Bank, formally reporting identity theft. That immediately set off a protocol. The mortgage would be flagged, payments suspended, and all associated accounts temporarily locked until the investigation concluded. Then we filed a cease and desist letter. Not just to Talia, but to Jackson too. A copy was hand-delivered to the Duskwood house. Shay insisted on using a courier with a body camera. I didn't ask why. I trusted her judgment implicitly. That night, I sat in my condo and watched the notification come in. Cease and desist served successfully. Recipient attempted to argue. Audio footage available upon request. I didn't need to hear the argument. I could imagine it well enough. Talia opening the envelope, her brows knitting, lips twisting. Jackson standing over her shoulder, jaw clenching, as he realized his little dream life was built on a stolen foundation. My foundation. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. I just sat there, staring at the TV I'd forgotten to turn on, letting the silence settle into me. The next morning, I emptied our joint checking account. Legally, it was still mine. We'd opened it 5 years ago, and while most of our bills came through there, I had my own private savings account. Thank God I'd never closed it. Just kept it as backup. The joint account had close to $18,000. Half of it had come from my last quarterly bonus. I transferred every single cent. Within the hour, I got a text. Talia, hey, did the account glitch? I think it's empty. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, Talia, Marcus, did you do this? I have bills due. We have shared expenses. That word again. She wasn't done. Talia, this is so petty. If you're trying to punish me, just say that. Don't sabotage us like this. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. But again, I said nothing. By that afternoon, she'd tried calling 5 times. I didn't answer. Because silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Let her spin. Let her talk herself into confusion. That's what people like her hated most, not knowing how much you knew or what you'd do next. Shay called later with an update. Sentinel has flagged the account. Their fraud team is reviewing the documents. Expect a notice soon confirming the freeze. Also, they asked if you'd like to place a full credit alert on your name. Yes, I said immediately. That was the next move. I contacted all 3 credit bureaus and froze my credit. Entirely. That meant no loans, no credit card approvals, no leases. Nothing could be taken out in my name unless I personally lifted the freeze. Every request would be flagged, every application denied. Talia and Jackson wouldn't be able to so much as open a department store card. Next, I changed all my passwords, set up 2-factor authentication on everything. I even requested an identity theft protection plan from my bank. I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I was building armor. Then I called our internet provider and had the condo's Wi-Fi password changed. That night, when Talia came back to grab some of her things, she stood outside the door, punching numbers into the keypad. Nothing worked. She knocked. I didn't open. "Marcus," she said through the door. "I can't get in." Still, I said nothing. The next morning, I returned the favor. I drove back to Duskwood, this time wearing sunglasses and a ball cap, just to avoid being recognized by any nosy neighbor. I parked farther away this time. No hovering. No confrontation. Instead, I walked by like a man taking a casual stroll, just enough to get a clean look at their mailbox. Their expressions when they received the cease and desist must have been priceless. But it was the next envelope they'd open, the one from the mortgage lender, that would really make her sick. A notice of fraud investigation. A freeze on the account. A warning about legal consequences pending confirmation of forged identity. I imagined her reading that, alone at the kitchen island where they once drank mimosas and dreamed of a future built on someone else's name. I didn't need to be there to see her face. I already knew the color it would turn. She called me that night, her voice calm but satisfied. "They're rattled," she said. "The courier said Jackson tried to intimidate him, threatened to call a lawyer." I chuckled. "Good. Let him." "Don't gloat," she warned. "We're not done yet." "I know," I replied. "I'm not gloating. I'm focused." And I was focused. Like never before. Because every document, every form, every login they'd used had become my silent arsenal. No raised voices. No fists. Just receipts. And by the time they realized what I was building, it would already be too late. By Saturday, I'd managed to convince myself I could get through the next few days without doing anything drastic. The legal groundwork was laid. Accounts were frozen. Documents delivered. A court date would be scheduled soon. In theory, all I had to do was wait. But something kept gnawing at me. A small, bitter question that wouldn't leave me alone. How many people knew? Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized this didn't just happen behind my back. It happened in plain sight. Someone had to have witnessed it. Someone had to co-sign her choices, encourage them, maybe even applaud them. That's what drove me to the barbecue. Talia's family had this long-standing tradition, the spring startup. A backyard cookout they threw every March to welcome new beginnings. I'd always found it cheesy, but I showed up every year, flipping burgers, pretending to laugh at Deacon's beer-fueled jokes. This time, I wasn't going for tradition. I was going for confirmation. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I just showed up. I figured if they had the audacity to steal my name, the least I could do was show my face. The moment I stepped into that backyard, the mood shifted. It was subtle. A half-second pause and laughter. Eyes flitting toward me, then quickly away. The way people react when they've been caught whispering about you 5 minutes before you walked in. Deacon, Talia's younger brother, was the first to approach me. He wore his usual tank top and sunglasses, nursing a beer with a forced smile. "Hey, Marcus," he said, dragging out the syllables like they hurt his tongue. "Didn't think you'd make it this year." I smiled back. "Yeah, me neither." He didn't ask about Talia. Didn't ask how I was. Just nodded and turned toward the grill like we were coworkers avoiding an HR complaint. I scanned the yard. The usual crowd was there. Her mother, Evelyn, sipping a mimosa, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat like she was posing for a garden magazine. Her cousin Mara, always overdramatic and oversharing. A few family friends whose names I barely remembered. No Jackson, thankfully. Not yet. I grabbed a soda from the cooler and stood by the fence, just watching them. It didn't take long before Mara found me. She could never resist drama. She tottered over in wedge heels, sunglasses too big for her face, holding a glass of wine like it was a microphone. "Marcus," she drawled, swaying slightly. "Long time no see. You look tense." I just smiled politely, soaking it all in. She leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I gotta say, you really must love her." I turned my head slowly. "Why is that?" She grinned like it was a punchline. "Buying that house for her in Jackson? That's wild." I mean bold, but wild. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just tilted my head and gave her a long, quiet look. She backpedaled quickly, trying to turn it into a joke. I mean, it's not like I would ever do that. Sharing credit scores is one thing, but giving someone your whole identity? That's like extreme love. I said nothing, just let her ramble. And in that moment, the truth crystallized. They all knew. Maybe not the fine details. Maybe not the forged signature or the insurance scam. But they knew about Jackson. They knew he was with Talia. They knew about the house. And not one of them had said a single word. Not even Deacon, who used to call me brother. After 2 beers, I looked over at Evelyn, who hadn't once looked in my direction. Not even a nod. Not even a twitch. I finished my drink and set the empty can down. Then I walked up the steps and approached her. She glanced up as I stood in front of her. "Marcus," she said, coolly. "Enjoying yourself?" I gave her a thin smile. "Lovely weather." She nodded. "Yes, it is." She reached for her purse, pulled out her lipstick, and reapplied it like I wasn't standing there, thinking about how she'd once told me I was the best thing to ever happen to her daughter. "I guess congratulations are in order," I said, keeping my voice light. "I hear your daughter and Jackson are settling in nicely." She froze for a split second. "Just enough. Whatever arrangement they've made is their business," she said, recapping the lipstick. "Not mine." "That's interesting," I replied. "Because the house is in my name. The debt is mine. The fraud, too. You're sure that's not your business?" She said nothing. I waited a moment longer, just long enough for the silence to twist. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't need more proof. I didn't need a confession. I had something better. Their indifference. Their silence. Their complicity. This wasn't just betrayal by Talia. It was betrayal by proximity. By everyone who nodded along and said nothing while I was being replaced. As I made my way to the front yard, Deacon caught up with me. "Look, man," he started. I didn't want to get in the middle. "I figured whatever y'all were dealing with, you'd work it out." "You knew," I said simply. He blinked. "Not everything." "Enough," I said. "You knew enough." He lowered his gaze, suddenly fascinated by the grass. "I hope the burgers were worth it," I said, and walked away. By the time I got back in the car, I felt lighter. Not because the truth hurt less, but because it confirmed something I needed to know. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. The signs were real. The betrayal wasn't subtle. It was public, worn like perfume, and everyone around her had chosen to pretend it didn't stink. But that was fine. Because while they were flipping burgers and sipping wine, I was collecting receipts. By Monday, Shay had received the bank's preliminary fraud report. The signature was officially flagged as non-authentic. The mortgage would be formally frozen pending litigation. Talia would be notified. The insurance carrier was also informed and was launching its own review into Jackson's addition to the policy. It was happening. Finally. But this wasn't revenge. This was the reclamation of my name, my credit, my dignity. And the more they acted like it was no big deal, the more the truth would bury them. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. The thing about justice is it doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes, it slips in quietly through the back door with a clipboard and a case number. And that's exactly how it felt the morning I got the email with the subject line, "Mortgage account, fraud investigation status active." I sat at my desk, coffee in hand, reading that message over and over. Sentinel Bank had launched an internal probe. Payments were paused. Interest frozen. No further actions until the identity claim was fully resolved. In plain terms, I wasn't legally responsible for that debt anymore. Not while the case was under fraud review. I set my coffee down and leaned back in my chair. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been, holding my breath for weeks, waiting for the financial walls to cave in. But now, I had time. I had solid ground beneath me again. And I was going to use every inch of it. Shay didn't waste a second. As soon as the freeze was confirmed, she went on offense. The next step was an official cease and desist, sent to both Talia and Jackson. This time, notarized and certified. No more informal warnings. These came with a legal bite. She called me shortly after. "They'll get the letters by end of day," she said. And I'm drafting the fraud affidavit for court submission. We're also notifying the credit bureaus. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. What about the insurance? Already flagged. The policy's under review. If they find forged documentation or misrepresentation, which we already suspect, they'll cancel it outright. That leaves the house uninsured, and Jackson without protection. And Talia, she paused. Well, that's the thing. Technically, she doesn't exist on paper in this mortgage. Her name isn't on the title. Not on the insurance. Not on the financials. Just yours. That means she has no legal right to the property. It was all starting to unravel. And I wasn't doing a thing but standing still. By noon, I got a notification from the bank. Someone had attempted to make a payment on the mortgage. Declined. Account locked. The fraud flag had kicked in. I could only imagine the confusion on the other end of that transaction. Was it Jackson? Or Talia, still trying to fix what they thought was just a temporary glitch? An hour later, I received a text. Talia, we need to talk. Why are the accounts frozen? What are you doing? I ignored it. 10 minutes passed. Talia, Marcus, seriously, you can't just shut down access to everything. We have responsibilities. That word again. Like it still meant something. Like the minute she realized she couldn't bleed me dry anymore, we'd somehow turned into a team again. Another message. Talia, if you think this is going to scare me, it's not. I'll fix it. We'll fix it. There was no we left. Not when she'd chosen someone else. Not when she'd written my name on a legal document like it was her signature to sell. That evening, I checked the doorbell camera. It was motion activated and synced to my phone. Around 6:47 p.m., she showed up. She stood at the door with a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder, tapping her fingers against the wood like she still had every right to be there. When she tried the old key code, nothing happened. She tried again, slower, more deliberate. Still nothing. Then she rang the bell. I didn't move. I watched from the hallway, just out of view. Marcus, she called through the door. I know you're home. I stayed quiet. She knocked louder. Don't do this. Come on. I know you're upset, but this is childish. Childish. Like I was throwing a tantrum, not recovering from a betrayal that could have bankrupted me. I stepped closer to the door, just enough for her to hear my footsteps. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Her tone shifted immediately. Okay. Just, let's talk, please. Nothing. Her voice dropped. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Jackson just needed a place. It was only temporary. I didn't think you'd find out like this. I closed my eyes. The lies were so casual now. Like breathing. I know it looks bad, she continued. But you can't cut me out like this. Everything's in your name. You'll ruin both of us. I wanted to laugh. Now she was worried about what my name could do. I turned and walked back to the kitchen. The doorbell rang again. Then again, faster this time, like she was hoping sheer persistence would change reality. Eventually, the bell stopped ringing. But I heard her voice one last time, barely above a whisper. Please, Marcus. Just, let me fix it. I didn't answer. Because she hadn't come to fix it. She came because she'd finally realized she couldn't control it anymore. The next morning, I met Shay at her office to sign the official affidavit. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was simple. I did not authorize this debt. I did not sign these papers. I am not responsible. She handed me a copy to keep. This will go to the judge this week, she said. And with the mortgage frozen, the bank will likely seek a default judgment, not against you, but against the house. Once that happens, we can move for property reassignment. Meaning? Meaning if they can't pay the debt, and you didn't sign for it, and there's fraud involved, the court will likely transfer ownership to you. Not them. The irony wasn't lost on me. A house I never wanted, never saw, never stepped foot in willingly, now on the verge of becoming mine, legally. Just so I could take it away from the people who stole it. I drove past it again on my way home, just once. The porch lights were off. The lawn hadn't been trimmed. A for sale sign was planted at the edge of the driveway, clearly put up in desperation, probably without the agent realizing the legal chaos wrapped around it. Good. Let them feel uncertainty for once. Let them wonder what would be taken from them next. Back at the condo, I finally slept. Not a nap. Not a restless, anxious doze. Real sleep. Because the weight was shifting now. Not just the money. Not just the house. But the power. And all I'd done was nothing. No yelling. No revenge schemes. Just the law. Just silence. Just the truth. The day we went to court, it was raining. Not heavy, but steady. Like the sky couldn't quite cry, but didn't want to stay dry either. I stood under the concrete awning of the county courthouse, watching water streak down the columns. My suit felt stiff, not because it was new, but because I hadn't worn it since our anniversary dinner last year. That night, she wore a red dress and kissed my cheek like we were a team. And now here we were on opposite sides. Talia arrived 5 minutes after I did. No umbrella, just a hooded coat and a messy bun, the kind she used to wear when she didn't care who was looking. But today, I could tell it wasn't careless. It was nervous. Her eyes scanned the sidewalk, landed on me, then darted away quickly. She walked in like she didn't see me, which was fine. Shay was already inside, sitting in the front row, her briefcase open and organized like a surgeon about to perform a very clean procedure. She didn't smile when she saw me, just nodded. Game face. The courtroom was cold, the walls gray. Not some grand hall of justice like in the movies, just a fluorescent-lit room with outdated wood paneling and worn carpet. But it didn't matter. This was where it would happen. Talia sat across from me at the defense table, next to a man in a tan suit who looked more like a real estate agent than a lawyer, probably someone she'd pulled from a Google search the night before. The judge entered, an older woman with a steely presence, glasses low on her nose. She didn't waste time with pleasantries, just went straight to the case. Devlin versus Devlin, she said. Matter of identity fraud and property dispute. Shay stood. Yes, Your Honor. My client, Marcus Devlin, is the legal signer on a $750,000 mortgage for a property at 482 Alderview Court. However, he did not authorize, initiate, or knowingly consent to this mortgage, nor does he reside at the property. The judge glanced at Talia. Is that correct, ma'am? Her lawyer stood. Your Honor, we don't deny that Mr. Devlin's name is on the paperwork. However, my client believed she had implied consent as she and Mr. Devlin were married at the time. She assumed joint authority over financial matters. Implied consent does not equate to a legal signature, Shay interrupted, calmly but firmly. Especially not on a $500,000 debt. We have evidence of forged documents, including a handwriting analysis and IP metadata showing the mortgage was submitted without Mr. Devlin's knowledge. The judge nodded, flipping through the file. I see the analysis here. Mr. Devlin, can you confirm this is not your signature? I stood. That's correct, Your Honor. It's a forgery. She motioned for me to sit. Mrs. Devlin, did you sign your husband's name on the mortgage? Talia hesitated. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something. She looked at me briefly, then at the judge. Yes, she said quietly. I did. My stomach turned. Not because it was a surprise, but because hearing her admit it out loud stripped the last, flimsy layer of denial from everything. The judge's face didn't move. Did your husband know you were signing his name? No, Talia said, barely audible. Did you inform him at any point before the mortgage was approved? No. The judge made a note, then asked, and the individual listed as a resident beneficiary on the property insurance, Jackson Pierce. Is that someone you live with currently? Her eyes dropped to the table. Not anymore. That one line said everything. Her lawyer stood again, trying to shift the tone. Your Honor, while we acknowledge a procedural misstep, my client's intentions were not malicious. She believed she was acting in the best interest of her household. This was an internal marital matter. Shay cut in. Fraud is not a private disagreement. It's a crime. The judge held up a hand. Enough. The room went quiet. She turned to me. Mr. Devlin, are you seeking financial damages or solely property reassignment at this time? I took a breath. I want my name cleared. The debt reversed. And full ownership of the house as restitution. The judge nodded. Understood. Talia's lawyer whispered again. She nodded, and this time she stood. Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement. The judge tilted her head, assessing. Go ahead. Talia turned toward me. Not the judge. Not the room. Just me. I didn't do this to hurt you, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't mean for it to become this big. I thought it would. I thought it would just pass, that no one would notice. She glanced at her hands, then back up. Jackson and it wasn't supposed to be serious, but it got serious, and I felt like I had already messed up so much that fixing it was impossible. So, I stopped trying. I didn't speak. She kept going. When I used your name, I told myself it was temporary. That you wouldn't find out. Or if you did, I'd explain it away. But then it all spiraled. The house, the insurance, the payments, and by then, I didn't know how to stop. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. I am. The courtroom was silent. Even Shay, who rarely gave space for emotion, let it hang for a moment before turning back to the judge. Your Honor, the apology is noted, but intent does not erase harm. And that was the truth. The judge cleared her throat. Based on the evidence and the admission from Mrs. Devlin, I am issuing a temporary transfer of mortgage responsibility to Mr. Devlin pending formal reassignment. The bank will be instructed to remove liability from the plaintiff. Furthermore, I am approving a hearing for civil damages next month. Mrs. Devlin, you will also be referred to the district attorney's office for potential criminal review. Talia's face went pale. Criminal review. She hadn't expected that. Her lawyer tried to protest, but the judge had already moved on. The gavel came down like thunder. One clean strike. One final verdict, for now. Afterward, outside the courthouse, she caught up to me. I heard her boots on the wet sidewalk before I saw her face. Marcus, she called. Please wait. I stopped, but I didn't turn. I meant what I said, she whispered, talking about being sorry. I looked over my shoulder, finally meeting her eyes. I know, I said. And then I walked away. Because apology didn't cancel consequence. And sorrow couldn't unsign a lie. The official notice came in a white envelope, stamped with a blue emblem from Sentinel Bank and a return address from a city I'd never been to. It arrived on a Wednesday. I remember because the mailman, a guy named Owen, who always wore earbuds and waved without speaking, paused just long enough to look at me differently, like he could sense something important was in his hands. I didn't open it right away. I carried it into the kitchen, set it on the counter beside the coffee pot, and just stared at it. Not because I was nervous. I already knew what was inside. But some things demand a moment of silence before they're unsealed. I poured myself a cup, sat down, and took one last breath as a man whose name had been tied to someone else's house, someone else's lie, someone else's version of a future. And then I opened it. Subject: Mortgage reassignment and title transfer. Case ID 948,127. The letter confirmed it all, in neat, clinical language. The fraudulent mortgage tied to my name had been voided. The loan would be marked as discharged. The debt no longer belonged to me. However, because the court had ruled in my favor, and because the fraudulent party had defaulted, the property was now mine by legal reassignment. A house I never chose. Never walked through willingly. Never asked to see beyond photos. And now it was mine. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the drawer with the others. The cease and desists, the affidavit, the court summons. Together, they told a story, not of a man who won something, but of a man who refused to be buried by what wasn't his. That afternoon, I drove to Duskwood one final time. No disguises. No slow cruises. I pulled right into the driveway like I'd lived there my whole life. The for sale sign was still there, tilted slightly from the wind, but now it meant nothing. No one could sell this place unless I said so. I stepped out of the car and took a slow look around. The lawn was overgrown. The roses she once bragged about on Instagram had wilted. The windows were shut tight, but one of the blinds was bent, like someone had peeked out and forgotten to fix it. The house felt hollow, like it was holding its breath. I had the new key in my pocket. Slipping it into the lock, I turned it once and pushed open the front door. The air inside was stale. Cold. I could still smell lavender from whatever diffuser they'd left plugged in. I stood in the doorway for a moment, half expecting voices, movement. But the silence was complete. The furniture was still there. She hadn't taken it yet. A beige couch, a coffee table stacked with magazines, a tall floor lamp with a missing bulb. It looked like they'd left in a hurry. Or maybe they hadn't truly believed the day would come when they'd be locked out of what they'd stolen. I walked through the kitchen. The granite countertops were spotless. Too spotless, like someone had wiped them down nervously, maybe hoping the evidence would vanish with the crumbs. The fridge was empty. A few magnets remained. One with her cousin's wedding date. Another shaped like a pineapple that read, "Bless this mess." I stepped into the master bedroom. That was harder. The bed was unmade. Sheets crumpled. There was a single high heel under the dresser, forgotten in the scramble. On the nightstand sat a half-burned candle and a phone charger that no longer had a phone to serve. I didn't touch anything. I didn't want to. This wasn't a victory lap. I wasn't there to gloat or to imagine some dramatic monologue about reclaiming what was mine. The truth was, this place had never felt like mine. Even now, with the deed in my name and the law on my side, it still felt like a lie. A beautifully staged set built on betrayal. I walked into the backyard. The pergola where I had once seen them together was still standing. The patio chairs were gone, but the ghost of their presence remained. I could still see her laugh. The way he used to press his hand into her lower back. The way she looked so free not just from me, but from everything I thought we'd built. I stood there for a long time. Then I turned around, walked back inside, and called a real estate agent. Her name was Clara. I told her I wanted the house listed immediately as is. I didn't care about staging or repairs. Just get it off my hands. She asked me if I wanted to tour the property first, maybe get a sense of what it could sell for. I told her I didn't need to. It wasn't my home. It was a symbol, and I was ready to let it go. Over the next few weeks, Clara worked her magic. The market was strong, and the house was in a coveted zip code. We got 2 offers within 10 days. I accepted the one that came in above asking. The profits easily covered all my legal fees, and then some. When the deal closed, I didn't celebrate. No champagne. No Instagram post. Just a quiet dinner alone and a long walk by the lake near my new place. Because, yes, I had moved. Out of the condo, away from the city noise. I found a small cabin upstate. Nothing fancy. Just a wide porch, a wood-burning stove, and a view of the water that didn't need filters or curtains. I bought it under my own name. Paid in full. No loans. No lies. No one else's fingerprints on the deed. It was peaceful there. And every evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line, I sat outside and breathed deep, clean, uninterrupted breaths. The kind you forget you need when your life is filled with manipulation disguised as compromise. Sometimes, I'd wonder if she ever drove past the old house. If she stared at it and remembered how it all began. How she used my name like a spare key and let someone else move in behind it. If she ever regretted it. But mostly, I didn't think of her at all. Because that house wasn't the ending. It was the reminder of what I lost, of what I reclaimed, of what I would never allow again. The house became mine, yes, but it was never my home. That title belonged to something quieter now. Something earned. They say when a storm passes, everything feels clearer. The sky softens, the wind eases, and suddenly you can see what survived. I didn't fully understand that until I was sitting on the porch of my cabin, watching fog roll off the lake in long, lazy streaks. It was early morning, the kind where even the birds sleep in. No messages. No calls. No one knocking, demanding explanations or access. Just peace. For the first time in years, my world was quiet, and it was mine. It had taken months to get here. Months of legal battles, mountains of paperwork, endless meetings, and a silence so sharp it could cut. But I'd made it through. Not with anger. Not with theatrics. Just calm, deliberate steps. People expected explosions. I gave them strategy. They thought I'd beg. I built boundaries instead. When I first bought the cabin, everyone thought I was running away. Even Nate, my oldest friend, asked if I was sure I wanted to live in the middle of nowhere. But I wasn't running. I was arriving. For the first time in my life, I was planting myself somewhere no one could uproot me from. The day the final court document came through, a clean judgment that removed all ties between my name and Talia's mess, I didn't celebrate with champagne or fireworks. I printed the paper, signed it, framed it, and hung it in my office. Not because I wanted a trophy, but because I needed the reminder. My name was no longer something someone else could borrow, bend, or betray. It was mine again. Fully. Legally. Spiritually. I started using it differently. Not loudly, but intentionally. I updated all my accounts, changed my passwords, switched to a new bank that didn't have memories baked into every transaction. I even updated my emergency contacts. For years, her name had sat there by default. Not anymore. Now, when I introduced myself to someone new, I didn't do it with a hesitant smile or an invisible asterisk. I just said Marcus Devlin and let it stand. Strong. Steady. Unapologetic. People ask me sometimes if I forgave her. It's a strange question. Forgiveness isn't something you announce like a weather forecast. It's not an act for them. It's a release for you. So, did I forgive her? I forgave myself first. For not seeing the signs. For dismissing my own intuition. For believing that love meant silence and loyalty meant sacrifice, no matter how one-sided. Forgiving her? That came later, quietly, in pieces. Not because she deserved it, but because I deserved to stop carrying her weight. There was a time I thought revenge would feel sweeter. That reclaiming what was mine would come with cinematic satisfaction, something dramatic, something final. But the truth, the real power, was in letting go. I didn't need to ruin her life. I just needed to remove myself from it. And when she eventually called months later from a number I didn't recognize, I let it ring once. Then I blocked it. Because the man she used to control no longer existed. She had tried to rewrite my name into her story. Tried to make me the footnote to her fresh start. But she forgot one thing. I didn't need a new story. I just needed the truth of mine to stand. Unedited. Undistorted. Fully mine. In the quiet of that truth, I began to rebuild. Not just my finances, but my sense of self. I started small. Learned to cook again. Took long walks. Reached out to friends I'd lost touch with during the chaos. Some came back, some didn't. But I didn't beg anyone to stay. I was done with that version of me. I read more. Wrote more. I even started consulting for small businesses, helping people protect their assets, build clean contracts, create systems that couldn't be stolen with a forged signature. I didn't advertise it much. It spread by word of mouth. People who'd been burned found their way to me, and I helped them quietly, the way Shay helped me. Shay and I kept in touch. She invited me to her firm's 10-year anniversary. I wore the same suit I'd worn to court, only this time, it didn't feel like armor. It just felt like mine. She smiled when she saw me. "You look lighter," she said. I told her I was. She clinked her glass to mine and whispered, "Your case is still my favorite." It wasn't because it was juicy or scandalous. It was because you didn't scream. You didn't post revenge videos or send threatening texts. You let the paper do the talking. And that, in her words, was the most satisfying justice of all. One afternoon, almost a year after it all began, I drove past Alderview. The house looked different now. New owners. The roses were blooming again. A swing set had been added to the backyard. Someone had painted the shutters blue. It didn't hurt to see it. It didn't stir rage or sadness. It just was a house. Nothing more. I rolled down the window, let the breeze drift in, then drove away. I didn't look back. That night, back at the cabin, I lit a fire and opened a new journal. Clean pages. No scribbles. No lists. Just space. I wrote a single line across the top. This time, I live by my name, not theirs. Because in the end, that was the victory. Not the house. Not the legal win. Not even the silence. The victory was choosing my terms and no longer letting anyone else write over them. So yes, my name was once used without my consent. But now it only moves when I say so. And that is the only signature I'll ever need again. This whole journey taught me a lot about trust, betrayal, and what it really means to reclaim your life. I went with a quiet, strategic approach. But I have to ask you, honestly, if you were in my shoes, faced with that kind of betrayal, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them immediately? Gone for revenge? Or handled it quietly legally like I did? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.